Okay. Good evening, everybody. Tonight we're going to learn a little bit more about the Halacha of plowing, of Choreish, and we're going to see how this Halacha has a lot of ramifications to many other halachas. The halacha is like this. You're not allowed to drag a very heavy table or very heavy chair across an earthen floor, across the earth, because it may cause there to be a chritz, may cause there to be a little line in the earth, and that will make it possible to plant seeds. And it is the Halacha of Choreish. That's if you're pulling the bench or pulling the table, pulling the chair on a ground that is usually it's ground that you plant seeds in. What if you are pulling the table in a courtyard where no one's planting seeds? So then the prohibition that's being transgressed isn't plowing, because you're not planting seeds there, but the prohibition that's being done is called baina. It's part of building. If you pull the bench on the earthen floor of the courtyard, Halacha considers this as building. Now, you're pulling a bench and you have no interest in this happening. You're just trying to pull the bench because you want the table to be moved to one side of the courtyard to the other. So why are we saying that you're interested in plowing or interested in building? So the Alter Rebbe addresses this, and he says that although you have no interest in doing this, but still, since there's something that is definitely going to be caused as a result of what you're doing, so it's forbidden rabbinically. Although it's what's called malacha she'ein tzricha legufa, you're doing a work which you have no need for what you're doing. And it's also kalachar yad. You're not doing this directly. It's happening indirectly. You just want to pull the bench, and the fact that a little line is made in the soil isn't it's happening automatically. And mekalkel, and even more, you're ruining the soil. So it's all these reasons why you would think that you shouldn't be liable. And the truth is that biblically, there is no biblical prohibition of pulling the bench across the soil. However, the Alter Rebbe says, although there's no biblical prohibition, but there is a rabbinical prohibition. Why is there a rabbinical prohibition? Because, as he says in the Simin Shin Lamed Zayin, Kol Dover She'ein Miskaven Muter, anything which is done without your intent is okay. I feel even if you don't need it, providing that you may not cause something to happen. So if it's a smaller chair that won't necessarily cause it to be a line in the earth, then it's okay. But he says if it's but very big tables are forbidden to be dragged across the soil, and it's going to for sure make a little line in the soil. Sorry about that. It's what's called psik reisha. As we went in the last class, psik reisha means that if something definitely is going to happen, even though you have no intent at all for it to happen, still halacha says that it's forbidden because you are definitely going to cause something to happen. But if it's not for sure, then it is okay. There is a clear place in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch where he says that there's a difference between dragging the bench on the floor in a courtyard versus dragging the bench in a place where you plant things has halachic ramifications. He says there used to be people didn't used to have tissues, so when they used to go out and they didn't have bathrooms, they used to go out into an outhouse in the field, and they would use stones to clean themselves. So the halacha is you're not allowed to clean yourself. You're not allowed to go to the bathroom and in a plowed field. Why not? Because perhaps, says Shulchan Aruch, perhaps you may need to use stones, and you're going to throw those stones in a hole, and that will be transgressing the prohibition of Choreish, of plowing. That's if you're throwing it in a plowed field where you plant. However, the Alter Rebbe says in Simin Shin Yud Gimel, Hamashni Pekarka Bayis B'Chotzer, if you flatten the earth in your house or in a courtyard, as long as you flatten something out, you're chayiv. So this doesn't seem to be so relevant, but there is a halacha which seems to bring this home in a way that seems to be very hard to protect yourself from violating Shabbos. It says in Simin Shin Lamed Zayin Siv base, he says that there's a problem of dragging the bench even inside your house. Why? Gzeira mishum she'eina merutzef. Just because your house has stones covering the floor, but there's a decree that the sages made that you cannot drag a bench inside your home because you may end up dragging a bench in a place where there's an earthen floor. Now, who doesn't pull a bench on Shabbos inside? Everyone pulls chairs and benches inside a home. How come the Alter Rebbe says that it's forbidden? Everyone's doing this. So the answer is, as many Achronim say, and as the Mishnah Brura says, that although in general the rule is that whenever our sages made a decree, the decree stays despite the fact that the reasoning for the decree has long stopped being relevant, but this decree isn't relevant anymore. And the reason is because it's impossible to have the same scenario that was discussed in the Code of Jewish Law. Why? Because it used to be when people would build a home, what was a home? A home was 4 walls and a roof. You didn't make a floor. But now there's no such thing as a home without a floor. Since there's no such thing as a home without a floor, so therefore there's no prohibition of dragging a bench across a floor inside a home, because there's no such thing inside a home as having a home without a floor. And therefore the Achronim, later codifiers of halacha, say that this decree in Shulchan Aruch doesn't apply nowadays. And the same thing you would think would apply also to the other decrees that it says in Shulchan Aruch. For example, it says in Shulchan Aruch, you're not allowed to sweep the floor on Shabbos. You can't sweep the floor. Why? Because if you're sweeping an earthen floor, what happens? If you sweep an earthen floor, let's say there's a little hole in the floor. Let's say the earthen floor has a little bit of a ditch. So by sweeping the dust, you're going to end up filling that hole with earth. So therefore, it's forbidden to sweep. Now, who doesn't sweep on Shabbos? Everyone sweeps on Shabbos. It is true you're not supposed to sweep with a broom which has hard bristles, because the hard bristles, it's likely that they may break on Shabbos. And it's also true that some Achronim say you shouldn't use one of those, I don't know what it's called, but they have these, it's like a vacuum, you put it over it's a rolling brush that's used on a carpet, even though it's not electric. But since it's uvd in the chel, since it's similar to what's done during the weekday, so Achronim say you shouldn't use that on Shabbos. But who doesn't sweep on Shabbos? Everyone sweeps on Shabbos. So how come it says in Shulchan Aruch? It says no, you can't sweep even indoors. So again, the Achronim say that this decree isn't relevant nowadays, and it seems the same would apply also to a third decree the sages made. The sages said that in addition to the biblical prohibition is you're not allowed to plow on Shabbos, because since in order to produce the spices that were used to dye the curtains in the Mishkan, they had to plow the soil. So therefore, it's forbidden for us to do anything that was done in the Mishkan. We're also not allowed to plow on Shabbos as well. So in addition to plowing, it's also biblically forbidden to remove stones from the earth to allow things to grow. It's forbidden to water the earth. It's also forbidden, to discuss last time, it's also forbidden to put fertilizer on the earth. And that's all biblically forbidden. One of the rabbinical prohibitions that was added, that our sages made, I like the word rabbinical prohibitions or the sages' prohibitions, talking about divine inspiration. One of the things that was given to our sages by divine inspiration was that it's forbidden to play with nuts on the floor on Shabbos. Because if you play with nuts on the floor, what's going to happen? just like in more modern times, people played with marbles, and today other games are played on the floor with maybe toy race cars or whatever it is. If you play with these things on Shabbos on the earthen floor, you're going to end up flattening something out. So it seems again that this decree shouldn't apply nowadays because we don't have earthen floors in our house. It would apply outside, and the same as all the other decrees. You wouldn't be allowed to drag a floor across in your courtyard, even on a stone floor in your courtyard, because there are earthen floors in your courtyard. You wouldn't be allowed to sweep in your courtyard because there are earthen floors in your courtyard, just because the floor you're on now is stone. But it would seem it's okay to drag a bench and to sweep with a broom which has soft bristles and to play marbles in a floor inside your home. There are those that say that you're not allowed to. They say that even nowadays you shouldn't play marbles on the floor unless you have a mat or a carpet, but on a flat surface of the floor, of a tile floor, there are those that say it's forbidden, but there are those who say that it's okay because, again, this decree isn't relevant, according to they maintain, because we don't have this kind of scenario where you might have an earthen floor. There are no earthen floors. Outside is a different halacha. Outside there are earthen floors, and therefore it doesn't matter if it's an earthen floor or if it's a stone floor, the halacha does apply. That's what many maintain. The question like this question is very pertinent nowadays, also, as we shall hopefully see a little later on. The question is like this. What did we say before? Why is it forbidden to drag the bench across the floor? It's forbidden to drag the bench across the floor because it's definitely going to cause a little line. What if it wasn't definite? Then it's okay. So if it's not definite, it's okay. But in regarding the halacha of sweeping the floor, it's not definite when you sweep a floor that it's going to cause earth to go into a hole. So how come our sages said that it's forbidden to sweep a floor? Why don't we apply the rule, kol davar she'eino miskaven muter? Whatever you have no intent to do, as long as it's not for sure going to happen, it's okay. When you sweep the floor, it's not necessarily will cause, we're talking about getting back to the earthen floors. In an earthen floor, why is it a problem to sweep the earthen floor? Because you might end up filling up a hole or flattening up a little mound. Then you might not. And the rule is that if it's not for sure, it's okay. Kol davar she'eino miskaven is muter. Whatever you have no intent is okay. So the answer, this question was actually asked by the Rivosh and the Kesef Mishnah on the Rambam, and the Alter Rebbe addresses this question as well. And we're going to see how there are a few opinions. It's very, very deep, but we'll just go slowly over it. And we'll be able to get it. It's not going to be too complicated. The Alter Rebbe addresses a similar question. It says in Shulchan Aruch, in Simin Shin Ayin Zayin, ریشی Ayin Zayin. So ریشی Ayin Zayin, Alter Rebbe says, Ner doilik, if you have a lit candle, Shu munach korev el adelas, which is placed next to a door, negem psichas delas mamish, it's directly, mamish, literally next to the opening of the door, ve'inyan she'yiftachu adelas yuchel achabes yinash v'ruch mechutz, in a way that the candle will go out if a wind blows. Also, you're not allowed to open the door next to this candle. Why? Because maybe the wind will cause the candle to go out. And although you have no intent to do this, since if the wind blows, the candle will go out, therefore it's forbidden to open the door. Now, this isn't definite. It's not definite. When you go to open the door on Shabbos and the wind isn't blowing, it's not definite that you open the door and the candle go out. But it's still forbidden to open the door. Why is it forbidden to open the door? Because a wind might blow. What does that mean? It's called selfexplanation. Selfexplanation means that it might be definite. When is it definite? It's not definite. Well, if a wind blows, a regular wind will blow, not an unusual. If a regular wind will blow, you open the door, the candle will for sure go out. It happens to be right now there's no wind blowing, but it's possible wind would blow. And since it's possible that a wind would blow, it's called selfexplanation. There's a doubt that something could for sure happen. You don't know when you're opening the door what may transpire in a moment. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe says you're not allowed to open the door. It's called selfexplanation, a doubt of something definite. Now, this isn't the opinion of everybody. There are differences of opinion about selfexplanation. Where do we have an argument about this? We have an argument about this in Shulchan Aruch in Siman Shin Zayin. Shin Zayin talks about a following scenario. Let's say you have a cholent pot, and the cholent pot is everyone finishes eating at 1 o'clock, and they put it in the kitchen, and they leave the pot opened, and then some flies come into the cholent pot. So now you want to cover the cholent pot. So halacha is on Shabbos. One of the halachas on Shabbos is you're not allowed to trap. So you're not allowed to put the cover of the cholent pot on the cholent pot because you're going to trap the flies inside. What if you don't know if there are flies inside? So the Alter Rebbe says that you can't cover the cholent pot if there are flies inside. Others argue. Others say it doesn't matter if you cover the cholent pot and there are flies are inside because the prohibition is to trap an animal or to trap an insect. But here, when you cover the cholent pot and you trap your flies, you haven't trapped them because as soon as you open up the cover, the flies will fly away. So it's not really called trapping. But the Alter Rebbe isn't satisfied with this being okay. The Alter Rebbe says still, what you should do is if there's a fly in the cholent pot, you could cover it, but make sure there's a spoon or something that's also there so it doesn't cover the pot completely so that the flies aren't completely trapped. That's what the Rebbe says. There are opinions which say that it's okay. Why is it okay? Because maybe there aren't flies in the cholent pot. So who says if there are for sure flies in the cholent pot? So the Alter Rebbe, so getting back to what we said earlier about psic reisha. We learned in the last class as an argument between the Aruch and Tosfos about psic reisha ניחא, which means if something for sure will happen, you don't want it to happen. So the Aruch says it's okay. We don't paskin like that. We paskin that even though you don't want it to happen, it's forbidden. You don't want any flies. But so therefore, the Alter Rebbe says you cannot put the lid of the cholent pot on the pot because even though you don't want the flies, you're trapping the flies. And we don't rely on the opinion which says that's not called trapping. So what should you do? You should put a spoon there so it shouldn't fully trap it. The Taz, however, he says it's okay. Why is it okay, says the Taz? The Taz says because who says there are flies in the cholent pot? You don't know if there's flies. So the Alter Rebbe says, he paskins, Alter Rebbe rules, not exactly like the Taz. He says something similar. He says, you don't have to check if there are flies. You don't have to look if there are flies. Because there are two reasons we have to be lenient. Reason number one, because it's not called trapping anyways, because you haven't trapped the flies, because they're going to run away as soon as you open. And reason number two, because maybe there aren't flies. So because of both reasons, the Alter Rebbe rules leniently. The Taz is more lenient. The Taz says that as long as you have just a reason that there might not be flies in the cholent pot, even if there are flies, you're for sure trapping them, the Taz says it's still okay. In other words, the Taz says, selfexplanation is mutter. If there's a doubt that something definite will happen, the Taz says it's okay. If as long as it's for sure not going to happen, it's okay. But the Alter Rebbe doesn't rely on that, and he says you have to have an additional leniency, additional reason to be lenient, and that is the fact that you're not catching anything. So getting back over here to the door, so the Alter Rebbe says that according to the opinion which holds that selfexplanation is usher, that even if there's a doubt, if you might be doing something, it's forbidden, not according to the Taz. It makes sense why you can't open the window next to the candle. But how does the Taz explain why you're not allowed to open the window next to the candle? You don't know if wind's going to blow. How come the Taz says by the cholent pot that you're allowed to close the cholent pot because maybe you will not, maybe there's no flies in the cholent pot, therefore you're allowed to do it, but maybe no wind is blowing either. And the Taz maintains that the halacha is you're not allowed to close the shompa. So Alter Rebbe says like this. The issue over here, Alter says this in Kunshas Achron, in Siman Reish Ayin Zayin Sefkat and Aleph. The Alter Rebbe says that there's something over here that is unique. It's not so clear from the language of the Alter Shulchan Aruch to me that this is the meaning, but this is the way many have explained it. What the Alter Rebbe is saying is that if you start opening the window and then the wind starts to blow, it's unlikely that you will have the wherewithal and the senses around yourself to say, I shouldn't keep opening the window because the wind is going to blow and it's going to blow out the candle. Once you start opening, even though the wind starts to blow, you may continue opening. And getting back to our question about sweeping in the house, if you start sweeping and you happen to notice that there's a hole, and you happen to notice that you're going to sweep the sand, the dirt into the hole, as you're in the process of sweeping, it's unlikely you're going to stop. So that's why even the Taz would agree that that's forbidden. Now, we don't hold like the Taz. The reason we don't hold like the Taz, why do we hold like the Taz? What's the reason for the argument who holds, the opinion which holds, that even a selfek psikareshah is asur, a doubt that something definite may happen is forbidden? What's the reason? The Alter Rebbe says the rule in general is, selfek sveka daraisa l'chumra. If there's a doubt that something may be biblically forbidden, then it's forbidden. So since psikareshah is biblically forbidden, since if something for sure is going to happen, if it's a real malacha, like causing a candle to be put out, since it's sefeka deraisa, or the analogy of the candle, it's probably not biblically forbidden because you don't intend to put out the candle. But since in general sveka deraisa l'chumra, so therefore just because something is a psikareshah, just because it's something is a safek l'chumra, if there's a doubt, we still are strict. So all of this brings us to many questions that we have nowadays in modern times about many things which are a doubt that something may happen. Let's talk about a refrigerator. You have a refrigerator, and the famous Kabbalist from Montreal, Rabbi Greenglass, wrote a sefer which the Rebbe edited about halachas and mahagim of Chabad. And he mentions in the sefer that people who are strict on Shabbos do not open a refrigerator unless the motor is on. Why not? Because they're afraid that if you open the refrigerator when the motor is off, the wind that goes in the refrigerator, or the heat, goes in the refrigerator, will cause the engine of the refrigerator to turn on. So it comes out when you open the refrigerator, you caused it to go on. Now, we learned in the last class about how koichoi, it's only considered like your energy by the very first thing that you do. That's what the law is. For example, when you wash your hands, let's say you don't have a kvart, you don't have a cup to wash your hands. So Alter writes in Siman Kuf Nun Tes that if you don't have a cup, what should you do? If you open the faucet, so the very first gust of water that comes out of the faucet is considered like your energy, because you caused that first flow of water to come out. So although the halacha is when you wash your hands for bread and you wash your hands in the morning, you have to with your own power. But if you open up the faucet and you put your hand there for a second, that's considered your power. What you need to do is to open the faucet up, close it, open it up again, because we wash 6 times. You have to open and close it 6 times if you have no cup. So in a similar way, it would seem that regarding the laws of Shabbos, if you open the fridge and just your initial open the fridge doesn't cause the motor to turn on, and although eventually it's there, it's open for a long time, the air goes in and it causes the motor to go on, that's not an issue because your initial opening the fridge isn't causing it to turn on. The problem though is you don't know when you open the fridge how much air, how much heat would be needed for the fridge to turn on. And therefore it would seem it's a safek psikareshah. It's a doubt. Maybe you're causing something definite to happen. Maybe you're causing the fridge to turn on. And we learned to point out to Rebbe, safek psikareshah is asur. If there's a doubt that something definite may happen, it's forbidden. Therefore Rabbi Greenglass says And that's why people always did this. They didn't open up a refrigerator when the motor was off. But many people are lenient about this nowadays. The reason they're lenient about this nowadays is because there are thermostats on our homes, heaters and air conditioners, and it's almost impossible to be careful about this nowadays, because every time you open the door of your home, the air conditioner is off. You open the door of your home, it's on a thermostat, it's going to cause the air conditioner to go on. It's also selfexplanation. So should the halacha be you're not allowed to go into your home because you may cause the air conditioner to turn on or the heater to turn off? So many say that it's hard to be careful about this, and therefore they maintain that it's not something that we could keep, and since the Alter Rebbe says that there are different opinions, and since it's a very difficult situation, so therefore we could follow the more lenient opinion, which says that selfexplanation, a doubt whether something definite will happen, is mutter, is permissible, and therefore would be allowed for you to open up the door of your home and open up the refrigerator door. That's what many maintain, but it's not really impossible to be careful about this. You could put on your thermostat to a certain temperature the whole Shabbos, and and you could keep it on auto mode so that it's not affected by the door. There are things you could do, but that's what many maintain. They say that's okay. That there's not reason to be as strict today as there used to be. Of course, with an oven, the second you open up an oven, it's going to turn on. It's not even a suffer, not even a doubt. So that there's no reason to be lenient at all regarding an oven. But even regarding a fridge, it seems the best thing is to wait till the motor of your fridge turns on, so that you don't cause the motor of the fridge to turn on. And this is something that the Rebbe acknowledged in this Sefer Rabbi Greenglass that the Rebbe edited. That they didn't say it's forbidden. He said there are those who are stringent about this, and this is something that seems to be the best way to go. Okay, that's what I want to share tonight. Any questions, comments, criticism? Yes, Yuda.
We regard air conditioning. If you, instead of putting it on automatic, you put it on, so the system works all the time, so you don't have this problem that it starts. And by the way, you put it on, you are saving also electric.
Yes, but Rivka is not going to like it. Your wife's going to say it's freezing over here. What'd you do, Yehuda? Rabbi Levin told you to put the air conditioner on the whole Shabbos. And then she's not going to come back to the shul and I'm going to get in trouble. So please don't do that. All right. Thank you for joining, Yehuda. A good night. All the best.
Thanks.